Hi everyone, welcome to the fifth video of this unit on 9/11. And this is some brief background on Osama Bin Laden. I don't really like being in the same screen as him, but I'm sure you recognize his face anyways. So I'm going to go back to a little bit of history on him first, some pre-9/11 stuff. So he was born in the late 50s in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. He had a very privileged and educated upbringing. In fact, he went to like one of the most prestigious schools, high schools in that area. As he grew up, he resented the growing influence of Western culture in Saudi Arabia and the Middle East in general, which is somewhat ironic because why he lived such a privileged life is because his father made a lot of money because his company distributed Western goods throughout the Middle East, like Snapple. And, what's more Western than that, right? So in the 1970s, the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, right? We'll get to the Cold War later in the year, but basically you have the US and the Soviets sort of competing to increase their sphere of influence in the world. Capitalism or democracy, I should say, and communism. So at this point, the Soviets were in Afghanistan. And Osama bin Laden went to Peshawar, which is in Pakistan, and it's on the border with Afghanistan. They don't think of political borders the way we do, which we can get into later, but it was close by. He wasn't an actual fighter. He was more offered financial support, offered moral support for the Afghani rebels, and he helped encourage people from all over the Middle East to come out that area to fight. But the Soviets are about to withdraw from Afghanistan, but right before they do, he did help create Al-Qaeda, which we mentioned a little bit in the video about the embassy bombings. So after the Soviets withdrew, he returned to Saudi Arabia, and what he did there was help fundraise to have Al-Qaeda grow in significance. His parents were not happy with these shenanigans of his. They were not opposed to Western culture. They did not like his militant angle on things. They tried ways to stop him by even taking away his passport. So he leaves Saudi Arabia and goes to the Sudan, which is more supportive for Islamic militants. So operating from there, Al-Qaeda was then behind some acts of terror. One of these was a hotel bombing in Aden, and this is a picture of Aden. And the hotel was housing U.S. troops at the time who were on their way to a peacekeeping mission in Somalia. Now, none of the American troops died, but 2 Austrian tourists did die. And the acts of violence continued. He helped to train Somali rebels who killed 18 troops, U.S. troops in Mogadishu in 1993. They were linked to the 93 World Trade Center bombing, which we've already covered. They were also behind an attempt to assassinate the Egyptian president, Hosni Mubarak. So think of what we did with the 1998 bombings as well, and how the Egyptian Islamic Jihad were an influence for there. So you see that same sort of motivating factor. They were behind the bombing of a U.S. National Guard training center in Riyadh in 1995. And a famous one, the Kobe Towers, you see that in the image here. That was in 1996. It was in Tehran, and it looks like an apartment complex. It housed U.S. troops at the time. A well-known act against the United States was now not just at embassies, but our ships. So this is the USS Cole. It was an American naval destroyer. It killed 17 of our sailors and injured 38. And then we get to 9/11, and he's behind that. So I'm not going to just stop and talk about that because we're sort of talking about that throughout the whole unit. So what happens after that? In August 2010, the CIA traced him to a compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan, which is about 35 miles from the capital of Islamabad. So for months and months and months, the CIA was watching the house. There was drones in the sky monitoring it. And by May of 2011, you probably have heard of when the Navy SEALs went in and got him and found him in an upstairs bedroom where he was with a pistol and a rifle, and he was shot and killed instantly. There's been movies and books about it, quite a few. So you see this is President Obama, who was congratulating all the troops who were involved, right? Not all of these went to the House, but, and all the missions related to it. I've been sharing what music's popular when these things happen. The song that was on the charts when he was killed was E.T. by Katy Perry and Kanye West. So the night he was killed, late that night, it was like 11:30 or something, President Obama came on TV and he had a speech, but he says justice has been done. So I know justice is a theme in your English classes right now as well in our class. So, just reflect on that. Was that justice? Is that justice to then make things better? And why did it? The burial for him, his body was taken on a helicopter, which was crammed full of Navy SEALs, and it was flown to an aircraft carrier. It was given a proper, I know we're missing a quotation mark there, Islamic burial, and that the body was prepared the correct way, the correct passages from the Quran were said, and things like that. And then the body was weighted down and dropped into the Arabian Sea. And we'll talk about in class, why do you think it was brought there? It's partially for the same reason that there's no photos, no death photos of him can be released to the public. So what do you think that is? So then later that night, the American response was huge. To this day, I'm upset that I was already asleep at the time, and I did not know what was going on until I woke up the next morning and saw my phone had all these text messages. You can see firefighters here celebrating in the streets of New York City. Why would New York City firefighters be celebrating this, right? I'm sure you know, but think about that for a second. Just people, like all the cities were full of people like celebrating college campuses in the streets, and of course the newspapers the next day. That was the huge, huge story. So obviously this connects to 9/11, but you can sort of see a little bit of the cause and effects here. Also, the cult of personality. Would 9/11 have happened if Osama Bin Laden didn't exist? Would the War of Terror have happened if he didn't exist? Now, something to think about. There's no right or wrong answer, but there's a lot of takes on that. Also, how did this experience affect our culture? We've already seen the political cartoons with Osama Bin Laden's face. We want him dead. What did this do for patriotism? And was this justice? And does justice still need to be carried out regarding 9/11? So those are just some themes we'll talk about. If you have any questions, of course, let me know. Make sure you submit the Google form, and don't forget your standard reflections as well. All right, so I will see you next class. Enjoy the long weekend.